Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessica. I am the festival director for Chicago Comedy Film Festival and now the LA Comedy Film Festival, which was obviously supposed to be in LA. What a crazy year. We're actually going to talk a little bit about 2020 and how that has affected filmmaking. So I would like for, and as I said in the email, if you could mute yourself when you're not specifically talking, it's not always going to be easy because you might want to jump in, and I know how that can be, so I'm not really that worried about it. But just to the best of your ability. And I want to start off by everyone just giving us your name, what film you're with, and like a log line of your film. And I'd like to say to anyone watching this, obviously, if you go to our website, losangelescomedyfilmfestival.org, then you'll see all of the programs. We have 106 amazing short films, web series, pilots from all over the world. So this is a panel about representation in comedy. However, I will admit that most of the questions are really just about representation in film. I'm sure we'll talk about comedy specifically because this is a comedy film festival. But I just wanted to say that up front. So with that being said, maybe we could try to go in alphabetical order to make it as easy as possible. So that would be, well, it would be Jordan and then Patricia, actually. So that works out.
Alrighty, I'm Jordan Anderson. I'm in the film The Hood that was directed by Patricia, and logline. I think the actual logline in the profile on your page is an actor goes to Compton to do research for a film and gets an education.
A struggling actor.
A struggling actor, yeah.
To research a role as a rapper,
yeah,
and gets an education. And he is the star of the show.
Thank you both for being here. Excited to have you. So we'll move on to Jowanda. Got it, okay.
Hi, my name is Jowanda. I represent the web series Rhonda Mitchell, MD. And basically that log line is a doctor is forced to go back home to Harlem to deal with her family's clinic, though she doesn't want to be there. So it's a comedy about that adventure.
And I guess I didn't say this, but can you also say what your role is with the film? I know Patricia's director, Jordan, you're the lead actor. So can you tell us, did you write and?
I co-wrote it with two other writers, with the creator and another writer. And I directed 3.5 of the 5 episodes. And so the opening episode that's a part of the festival, I directed it. And I'm also the lead actress, so.
Yes, very good. Okay, now alphabetical, Mia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mia Jessup. I am the writer, director, and executive producer of Summer in the City. And that is about 5 women catcalling a Mr. Softy truck. And it's about reclaiming, everyone nods. It's about reclaiming your body during the summer.
And did you say what your role was with it?
I was the writer, director, and executive producer.
Okay, great. Jacqueline.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Pereda, and I am the writer, producer, director, and also starred in Generation Porque, and that's a series. And Generation Porque is a coming-of-age comedy following a Cuban American girl as she tries to chase her dreams in the city while enduring her very Republican Cuban parents in New Jersey, and she can chase her dreams, but she can't outrun her family. So that's my line.
Very good.
You can all, it's about, about identity and just trying to, figure out your dreams and while you're maintaining both worlds. So
very good. Okay, that leaves us to I get WV, right? So Sarah is next, and then Perry.
Hi, my name
No,
is
BW. You guys, I'm doing my best here, okay? But go ahead, Sarah. You can still go.
All right, thanks. Well, thanks for all of you being here. Anyway, this is one of my favorite topics, so I'm really stoked to be a part of this. So thank you for having us all. My name's Sara Werner, and I had the honor of directing Killer Workout. As you can see behind me, I'm trying this new thing. Does it work? So Killer Workout is about Joy. She is a queer biracial personal trainer, and we meet her as her homophobic, racist, sexist, classist clients have finally broken her. And she starts having these fantasies of brutally murdering her clients. And then as we meet her in this pilot, we see that one of her clients gets the better of her and she has a very violent interaction with said client. So it's about reclaiming your power and finally taking a stand against some bullshit. And we try to use humor and comedy to talk about some serious inequities.
Awesome. And Perry. Oh, I think we need to unmute you. Let me unmute you. Or maybe you can do it.
There, does that work?
Yeah.
Great, okay. Hello, I'm with Avocado Toast the series. I am the co-creator, co-producer, co-writer, and co-lead of the series. I also edited it with another editor. So I wore a few hats. So it's our official log line is that it's an intergenerational sex comedy exploring the comforts and awkwardness of sex between 25 and 69. When it comes to millennials and baby boomers, these nuts haven't fallen far from the tree. So yeah, it's dealing with sort of later in life coming of age moments. One character comes out as bisexual in her 30s, and the other character's parents get divorced due to an affair, and they're both sort of kind of navigating that together.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right, I'm just going to jump in, and if you feel like you have something to contribute and you want to answer the question, feel free. I'll do my best to kind of figure out who's waiting to talk, but also just jump in. This is casual. It doesn't have to be so scary and formal. And I'll admit, I'm reading from my phone right here, so you know. So obviously a major issue with representation in film is that the stories being told aren't always being written by people who have had that lived experience. So I'm just curious if any of you can speak to that in your career, creating content, maybe even if you are an actor, what you've encountered in terms of that in the industry.
I think like for me specifically as a Black male actor in my later 30s, especially when I came to Los Angeles like 17 years ago, a lot of the roles that I felt were available, even just to audition for, were always in one lane. And I've always said humans are 360 people. And I feel like the representation was just not always fully human. There was always these stereotypes of maybe who I was or the people like me were. And that isn't always true to form. You know, we're all different. We have different backgrounds and stories, and to kind of isolate demographics, for lack of a better term, in a stereotype or a typecast is just not a full representation of people or humans or their experiences. That's from my end.
Sure. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you just said, is there anything that changed for you? I mean, I know some people have said because of that experience, then they went on to just create their own content or find more independent projects to work in. Is that true for you? Did you kind of take a different path?
I've always been like a storyteller and have always tried to write, even if it was just for myself. But I mean, really the hood and what Patricia wrote in Derek was somebody that I was like, this is a human, like this is a fully functioning person who is not the type that people would think he is. And I think that that's kind of what the film alludes to, is regardless of what type you are too, you're always seen through a certain lens in society because of representation or lack thereof. But I mean, really, Derek was a really good example of me looking at somebody on the page and being like, this is not a one-dimensional person that I'm used to seeing usually, you know.
Sure.
And I have to say, I'm not from LA. I'm an immigrant, but I think that if, you know, having friends in Compton and being very close with them, I thought, you know, really the only way that I can do the story any justice is really like to listen to the actors and to collaborate with them in order to create something that is truthful.
Sure. Thanks. Jacqueline, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I'm very, so in terms of like the physical, since I do look very like ambiguous, I've kind of encountered like, we don't know where to put you in type of thing. And then I really love like comedy that comments on the culture, like Larry David stuff, satire. So I've always kind of like not been able to put into a box. But my biggest thing is that, especially with like Latino stories, it's either they're like poor, oppressed, crossing the border, or it's like devious maids. And I like things that have like diversity of thought. Like in my pilot, the parents vote for Trump and they're Republicans. And as you saw with this election, Latinos came out in record numbers to support this. And the way we're portrayed in the media, it's just very one-sided some way. And not even just like the physical representation, it's more of the diversity of thought. And people come from different backgrounds and classes and races. And like we're not a monolith. So that's what I've always been drawn to. And just more the character first that just so happens to be Latina, that just so happens to be, you know, Black. So I think we forget when we talk about representation, especially, I think we kind of box it into like the physical and like the ethnicity background and race versus like, where did this person come from? You know, like what are their political views? And sometimes it could be very one-sided. So I always love and support comedy. And that's why I love comedy, because you can talk about these things. Yeah, that's been my experience.
Very good.
I was just going to comment on even meeting Eric. When I first heard about the script, I met Eric through his writing mentor, but after reading it, I was so confused. I'm like, all right, here's this white guy that just wrote this really powerful script about a biracial queer woman where he is a white cis man. And I kind of vetted him. I mean, reading it, I was so stoked because growing up as a kid, I was searching for queer content. I mean, we didn't have anything. Like I had Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen DeGeneres, so I couldn't really relate to. Then you have the L Word, which is just portraying this one stereotypical LA lesbian. And I'm always like, why can't Dexter be a queer biracial woman? So reading this, I'm like, all right, cool. She's Dexter in a way. And I was stoked. And I asked Eric straight up, because he's a really talented actor. And I'm like, well, why didn't you write this role for yourself? And he really wrote it. He's a personal trainer in New York City. So it is kind of an amalgamation of all his clients, but he wrote it for his ex-girlfriend who is a queer biracial woman. And he just saw what she experienced and just the atrocities mainly, and how these people belittled her. And he just thought it was so painful. And he's like, if I can use my agency to do something, I'm going to. So he wrote this role for her, and I thought Nina killed it. And she brought a lot of truth to character, and so I mean, she's living it. So and to me as a queer woman, I was stoked just to have any kind of representation in a mainstream-ish character. But it was nice to have that allyship. And I hate that I went in there with my preconceived notions over Eric too. I'm like used to, and I kept waiting for something to be in that script that was so jarring and off-putting, but there isn't. And it was just really nice to have that allyship and that support there. And then even going beyond just on the camera, I wish he could be here right now, but he did want to say one thing, that representation in front and back of the camera is obviously very important because it enriches our stories and storytelling. And that we need to make sure that we're not just doing window service. we need to actually tell stories from perspectives we haven't heard in creative ways that we haven't seen done before. And this was the first time I got to work with a female DP. We got female HMU, we had a mostly female cast. One of the producers that came on, and it was just really nice to especially have, I never got to work with a female DP before, and Carly and I just clicked, and it was, you had that intimacy and that trust, and it was really wonderful to have that empowerment in front and behind camera.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that because I think what everyone has said is pretty much an amalgamation of what I'm about to say. But starting out, I was trained as an actress. And I think what led me to writing was just not getting auditions or seeing anything on TV that interested me. Like if you're Black female, you're either strung out on drugs or you're just a strong Black woman and you don't need anything. And that just is not the story of every Black woman. And so I think one of the things that drew me to the original pilot of Rhonda Mitchell MD before we developed it into a show is that she is a Black female doctor in Harlem. She doesn't want to be there, and she doesn't want to treat the people that she grew up in the same neighborhood with. And she has all these complexities. It's about her finding love and not wanting to find love, and all of these labels that are put on her, and that she's not just strong, she's weak, she has weaknesses, she's a human being. And I just feel like sometimes it's hard when you are a person of color or in a marginalized group. People either want to paint you as super strong and you don't need anything and oh, how brave you are, versus the complexities of just being a human being where you're not all evil and you're not all good. Like, we want to play those roles too. I'm sure if you're queer, you don't want to just play the queer woman who's marching for rights. You're also the queer woman who's having difficulties at work and this and that. Like, you feel like you shouldn't have to explain these stories, but like you do. I guess that's why we're here. We have to explain these stories. And Eric, I'm gonna have to look him up because I've worked as a trainer in New York for many, many years. So, so now I'm like really intrigued by your story. But he dating a biracial woman who's also bisexual. The more people have more experiences with more people of diversity, the more these stories can come out, whether it comes from the person themselves or their interaction with being with that person. So I just want to say kudos to everyone who's telling their story or a story that they think should be told out there.
Yes.
Yeah, picking off of what Jowanda said, is that how you say your name? I was trained as an actor, and for about 5 years in New York, I was only acting, not writing or anything else. And I was really always interested in being whatever anyone else told me to be. I wasn't interested in really telling my own story. I thought, oh, I'm an actor, I can conform to, whatever role. And I think the big revolution for me was taking interest in my own stories and what I wanted to say. And I think that I felt like I sort of aged out of a lot of roles at like 25, 26, which was bizarre and messed up. And I just, I started to realize that I was really interested in writing about bodies, and specifically female bodies, and the relationships that we have to them. And so, yeah, for me, in terms of representation, I feel in my experience, it's really come from writing. And I think everyone has stories that they can share, and that are really special and that can portray the complexity that we don't always see if someone outside of that story is writing it.
Sure. And of course, now we're living in a different world where everything is happening differently. And I think that when you talk about aging out of some of these things, I think it's also becoming just a whole new world in terms of auditioning and casting. From personal experience, I know that you do age out really young, and also you're really put into certain stereotypes when you go into the casting room. So when you all create your content, I guess my next question is, how do you approach casting in order to cast a wide net and get the people that you want on that side, telling the stories that you're writing?
Can I just quickly comment on ageism? Because that's like something to me that I think is even more detrimental than culturalism. If you watch a film right now, it seems like ageism is something that's targeted towards women. I'm not saying that men don't go through difficulties of this, but every leading male actor is still getting the same age co-star woman 15 years later. Like the women are literally 15 to 20 years younger than which it doesn't have anything to do with the story. And the man keeps getting older and his co-star is still 20 years younger than himself when he started out. So I just have to say, we definitely need to just really write more stories even on that, because it's appalling to me.
I want to piggyback on that because we actually made a part of our show about an older woman who dates a guy who's in his 30s. So a woman who's in her 60s dating a guy in his 30s, because it is such an underrepresented, speaking of representation, category in terms of what we see. And we were like, I know so many powerful women in their 60s and they are beautiful and they're vivacious and they're sexy. And like, why aren't they being shown dating younger people in mainstream media? Because we see it, as you said, all the time with older men and younger girlfriends, and they just keep getting younger and they keep getting older. And yeah, so that was a huge part for us, is to be able to show two women in their 60s just like living their best lives. And I just think that's more of that is so important. And experiencing, you know, an open marriage. One of them is having an open marriage, and just showing different aspects of how people exist in the world.
Right. Good. I'm going to move on to our next question. Can any of you speak to, especially in comedy, stereotypes being used for comedic effect? Is that something that you've run into often, that you've had to sort of challenge at times? Because I know that that is a very common thing, although it's becoming less common because it is being challenged. But I just would like to know if anyone can speak to that.
It really depends. And like, we have to remember too, we're humans and we all naturally stereotype somehow. And it's like part of our biology. And sometimes they can be funny. I just think you have to be like smart and where it's coming from. And if it comes from like like if you're creating comedy that comes from a place of joy, people will feel it. If it's coming from like a really harsh place, like I think Lorne Michaels said that. I think Rosie O'Donnell wanted to play William Barr, the Attorney General, on SNL, and he's like, no, he goes, because we know how your feelings about him, how you don't like him or support him, and we can't have that. So I think it's also the intention, and like sometimes stereotypes are true as well, and it's fun to play with those and comment. Like in my pilot, the parents are from Cuba, and they're very dramatic and loud and speak Spanish. That's a lot of the culture. You know what I mean? So it's like, it is a stereotype, but it's also very true to the culture. So it's just really how like your intentions and how you're portraying them. I think, you know, when you watch something and you're like, ooh, like if it doesn't feel right, you're like, oh, this is, yeah, they don't like this group, or like they're not trying to, you know, comment on it in a positive way. Because comedy too, we're supposed to talk about stuff. You know what I mean? Like we're supposed to push that envelope and the boundaries as well. So if everything's safe and you never want to like offend anyone or even like touch certain topics, then I think like we're limited in that way. It's just really coming from a place of like joy. And just real quick, in my pilot, the roommate, the girl is Muslim. And when we first introduced the character, Jackie, she walks in on the girl praying and she's like, oh my God, are you doing yoga or whatever? And she's not making fun of the religion. She just literally just has like the slip up. And I think like stuff happens sometimes, and they're all like our cultural mishaps. So it just really like, you know, it really depends on the artist and like in their integrity, I think.
Anyone else?
I think the thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I really try creating queer content, and what I've been finding is that more, and it's happening more and more, but what we were really fighting for in our series was to show, if there is a stereotype that is being layered in, that we're showing more of the character. So you're not just seeing the stereotype, you're seeing it in that person is like an entire human being. Because I personally just get so sick of seeing a stereotype for a stereotype's sake, and then that's all they are. For like they're a gag, they're a punchline, or whatever that is. So I think with the stuff that I write, with the stuff that I work on, I always try and make sure that, like, are we telling a whole story? Even if a stereotype is present, are we able to still tell that person's entire three-dimensional story?
Right.
This is where it becomes like really important. Oh, sorry. For representation, really like all across the board too, because I feel like the experience, like it translates through from the writer to the people that build the sets to the people that light them and cast. And if you're lacking that experience, whether it's your fault or not, I feel like that always translates through in the final product. And really just, you know, like Patricia was saying earlier, and the way she defines her narrative, she relies heavily on the actual life experience of the actor she's using. You know, that's what brings out that deep-rooted truth and kind of universal human experience, is just what these people have lived and what they know. And I feel like regardless if you're an actor or a director, you know, a writer, your experience matters, and the representation of all those experiences are really kind of what, for me, bring that truthful narrative to the finished product. It's always really hard to determine that in the actual process of making film. You know, theater's different, you get the live reaction right away, but film and television, it's delayed. You know, you're waiting on the audience to see what you've done. And so really to find that truth, like it has to come from within. I feel like you can see it when it's forced, when someone actually hasn't lived that or gone through that experience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Jordan is a professional, sorry. Jordan is a professional actor, but I have a tendency to work with a lot of non-actors, and I think that helps keep the stereotype at bay.
Interesting. A couple of people, Sarah and maybe Mia wants to say something.
Yeah, I just piggybacking off you, Patricia. I do the same. Going back to your question about casting Jesse. I don't know, when you meet that right actor, I mean, you definitely want somebody that has a little bit of history, that has that truth, and then anybody who is brave enough to take on that role. But then back to the stereotypes and addressing them, I think as humans in general, truthfully, we self-deprecate. And I think that can come forth in dialogue and blocking. It's those pregnant pauses that really bring that truth forth. And I really did enjoy, I mean, I can think of past projects where I would meet with the writer and be like, hey, let's maybe change this here. Like, I don't really believe this. Or if they're using a character, it's a stereotypical character, I'm like, okay, we got to change this now. But fortunately, I have worked with some amazing producers who have always focused on telling the truth, having the right actor, having this intersectionality, which is so key to having proper representation. But in the case of Killer Workout, Eric really did address some stereotypes through dialogue, and it is that benefit of having the comedy that we can use that as a vehicle to kind of laugh at ourselves and break that ice. You can see Joy really pokes fun at herself, and then later on we have a therapist character as well. They go back and forth and do address certain stereotypes, and I think it's helpful. So I mean, it's kind of like what you hope the audience is thinking too, and you kind of meet them halfway and try to break some new ground, just kind of expand out of, I mean, we need our coming out stories. I don't know if everyone saw Happiest Season yet, and other shows. Like we all, like all these stories, like that's just for queer representation, but in general, like we do have these stories that kind of handheld the audience that maybe that isn't living that experience, so they can see it and understand it. But then we do need those stories where a character is just who they are. And I think that's what attracted me most to Killer Workout. It's in medias res, like she is who she is, and we're on this ride with her.
Hey, Mia, were you going to say something?
Yes. So going off of what Perry said, I think it is so important in comedy to present at least a little bit more complex characters, maybe not as much as you would see in a drama, but the stereotype that always really gets me is women being dumb as the butt of a joke. That drives me bonkers. And people can be silly, they can not be good at speaking maybe, or they speak before they think, but I can't stand when women are just dumb and that's the joke. And so I think in comedy especially, like a woman can say something before she thinks, or whatever, but I always want there to be like a reason why this character did it, or why they're behaving in this way. I want to have an understanding of it beyond just a cheap joke for the sake of the joke.
Mm-hmm. I think that everyone has said really great things about this, and I definitely appreciate the perspective of if it's coming from joy, because I think that is true. I think there are stereotypes, like you're saying, Mia, that are presented where it's like, okay, where's this coming from? And then you can see something else and it feels a little bit less, it's just less offensive, because you can tell that it's not done in a way that is meant to be offensive. So my next question is I have a couple questions that are more relevant to the time. I would like to know, as an artist, how the Black Lives Movement and the right-wing racist rhetoric has affected you as an artist. And if it hasn't, then so be it. But I would like to hear from people who it maybe has affected, because it is so prevalent right now.
Can I don't want to, I understand the right wing. I just want to be careful that we don't say everyone that is conservative or whatever is somehow, racist, but in general, just the ideology, I just feel like we have a lot of healing to do in this country. And I think people are hurting and people aren't listening to each other. And as an artist, again, our job is to show up, have a mirror to life and reflect it to the audience. And it's all of our colors. It's, it's like the light with the dark. And with comedy, I think that's the greatest gift, because we make it safe to talk about that stuff. And more than ever, we just have to lean into that and lean into the discomfort of why, people are, feel threatened by one another. So that's where I'm at with this stuff.
Yeah.
It feels like it's I just feel like it's such a privilege that we can even talk about it, you know what I mean? And use our art to address it in any way. Yeah.
So of course, the more important point, I think, is just the overall energy that has been happening, obviously from the extremist comments and rhetoric that's going on is what I'm really referencing, obviously. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I'd like to comment on that. I think that for me personally, as a Black from the South who lived in New York for 12 years and now I just moved to LA, what it has done is that it has made people see things that we've known, that we've seen and experienced our entire lives. So it didn't make me go, oh, wow, people are saying this. I mean, I've had people follow me around in stores in New York, not even in Georgia, in New York. So I've been aware of the craziness of it, but what it has done is that now everyone, the blinders are kind of off. And it's kind of hard for you to say, well, this doesn't exist now, when you actually see people on TV and on their phones saying things you didn't think they would say to someone in a store, or at Target or something. It's that part is insane. As an artist, what it has done, and I think it's sad that it had to take people watching people die on, on TV for it to happen, but it has made even Hollywood, which Hollywood has a part of this. No industry has been, is not a part of the racism that has existed. So I don't think, it doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal or you work in politics, racism has been around since the beginning of time. And what that's done is it's made studio heads and people go, we really need some more of that Black content. We really would like to see some Black female writers. And I've been writing for years. And I was like, hey, I've been writing up here for 15 years. I'm glad you want to see it now. Okay, I'm going to ride this gravy train. And now you really wanting to see something written by a Black woman or, you know, whatever. So in that aspect of as an artist, it has opened more doors of people actually realizing they need it. And I hope it's not just some seasonal thing, that we realize we need to see this content from so many different types of people forever. So that's my hope as a creative.
Yeah, and I feel like as an artist, specifically in this time, I mean, for me, like African American art is historically birthed out of pain in our country. It's just very, you know, they go hand in hand. And so I believe when you are witnessing so much Black pain every day, physically on the television, on your social medias, as a Black artist, I want to lean into that. I want to tell those stories. I want to highlight them. I want everybody to know that this is, just like Jowanda just said, this is the experience. And out of that is pain, but there's also a lot of joy and comedy and everything in between. That's like the representation conversation, right? Is so much of what we see in our art is attached to pain or slavery or this narrative of, you know, police brutality. And like for me personally, I lost a brother to police brutality in Utah 3 years ago. And that was a real moment for me where I really started to look at how I was being seen, no matter what I did. As an artist, as a human, there was always going to be a lens that somebody saw me through that wasn't my own. But that's not my lens and that's not my story to tell. So in this climate where it's just so in your face, I almost feel it's an obligation to just really lean into that, to push that narrative forward as hard as you can, and just really show people that this is a part of who we are, but it's a part of who you are too. Like, you are not exempt from this. We are all part of this. It's all part of the larger narrative here in America, as far as art is concerned too. You know, those things are just, they're bound together. So yeah, as an artist, I think for me, it's a responsibility to really share that and talk about that, because it does matter. I mean, it's a slogan, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, it does matter, and representation will help that matter even more. So yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm so sorry for your loss too, but I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, silence is violence. As a white woman, yeah, I'm queer, but I pass. Unless I'm holding a giant rainbow flag, I'm more than likely not going to be assaulted. Well, I mean, I don't know, being a woman in general, we're pretty prone to assault, but in general, silence is violence. We do need to break that. And Jacqueline, you're so right with the fact that we do have this privilege as artists, and it's a duty and a mission that we have to take this time to talk about it. And Jowanda, you're so correct too, that these stories have been there. People just haven't been awake yet. People have been marching the streets for decades, and you think that we would listen now, but I just hope that with 2020 has been a crazy year, and I know people are like, oh, 2020 is canceled, but I've been really trying to look at it as the time where we all were woken up together collectively. Like, that 2020 vision is that clarity. I mean, no one can turn away from it now. It's right in front of you. And I just hope people can keep their eyes open, and as well as their hearts and their minds. And I think that's also our job as artists, is to keep pushing that visibility. I hope that everyone, regardless of gender, sexuality, and race, class, thinks about others other than them and talks to people too, like you're saying with your research, Patricia. And it's so key to talk to people. What stories do you want to hear? How can we help represent you? And I think we just need to keep that narrative going because there's so many stories that need to be told. There's so many mediums now too. And that's another beauty of the fact that we have the internet, that we have YouTube, we have Vimeo, we have all these streaming services. So just keep pushing these stories. And it's hard. I mean, filmmaking's hard, but it's the path that we're all on. We're artists, and let's just keep going and hopefully keeping people awake, especially when we all do eventually go back to some sense of normalcy, that we can't turn away from what we've seen collectively as society. And the fact that I will say that 70 million people voted for a racist human, a homophobic human, and a sexist human is really scary. It's like half our world in the US, but then I think of other countries where, I mean, we would be like killed for talking about these topics, so, or censored. And I think have that benefit of being in the States and being in a more progressive nation. And we have our duty and artistry to use our voice and to elevate voices most of all.
Thank you. I'd like to say too, I know this is very heavy and this is a comedy film festival. The reality is that I've seen a lot happen over this year in the comedy scene. I primarily have lived in Chicago most of my adult life. And if you're not familiar, the Second City got a big hit on these issues. IO Theater got a big hit. All of these theaters in Chicago just kind of shut down because they didn't know how to cope with being told that they are contributing to underrepresentation and a lot of this heartache for marginalized groups. So even though this is a panel for a comedy film festival and we all are funny people, this is the time to get heavy about it because it's something that we can't just glaze over. And I think it does get glazed over in comedy, which is exactly why we're only doing this panel for the festival. I really didn't have any interest in talking about anything else, to be honest, because I don't think it's appropriate. So anyone watching, sorry, it's getting a little heavy, but that's what we're here to do. So as some of you have brought up, did anybody else want to say anything on that? And I appreciate everyone's, yes, Mia.
I can talk, yeah. Well, I've just felt like I felt like it was my turn to radically listen. And my hope in that, that 2020, my hope is that 2020 and the halt in productions and the entertainment industry and jobs, my hope is that it is also a time and a space for people to think about representation, and that perhaps some of the things that were slated to shoot or be put on in 2020 or the next year, that there is some reevaluation about that. That is my hope, because I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not sure how things like production slates are going, you know, whether they're going to continue in terms of what was planned or not. But I've also seen more programs that I think Women in Film, I think, is trying to change their structure and their membership, which is exciting to me too. So I am seeing some change, and I just hope that, you know, if we do continue, which it seems like we will, to be on pause because of coronavirus, at least for a while, that on the other side of it, we can be more thoughtful about what we're making.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on. It doesn't seem like anyone else is flagging me down. So COVID is obviously happening, big deal for 2020. So I'm just curious in terms of creating content and where you're at and what you're doing now, how you're moving forward. This is the whole new world that we're in right now. Obviously, my perspective from a film festival director perspective is, I'm not really sure. We are planning to still do festivals as long as we can hopefully get back to normalcy, but it's totally different as far as funding goes. So I'm curious, in terms of funding for you guys, what's changed? What are you doing differently to cope during a complete shutdown where we can't do things right now?
Unmute myself. Just jump in. Yeah, so I'm actually up in Canada. I'm in Toronto. Hello. So it's a slightly, we're in a lockdown right now. Oh wow, there's an amazing sunset outside. We're in a lockdown right now, but we are, oddly enough, still doing productions up here. We're finding ways to do that. So it's essential services and film productions, which is bizarre but wonderful, because, you know, like, if we can make content, let's make content. And so right now my team is working on our second season of the series. And I thank you. Yeah. So we're going ahead with I think we're just all saying we'll just figure it out and work within these protocols that they are allowing us to use in order to make this content. And finding creative ways to, you know, if I was just on a film in the summer actually that as an actor, and they recast somebody who was in the lead's bubble so that she could make out with them. And it was kind of a cool way, and he was trans, which is amazing too. And it was just like great representation through that. And it was a big film, but they were able to like just adjust and move and make things work, which I just think we're all, this whole year, we've all kind of had to shift and bob and duck and trying to figure out how to keep working. I'm also an eternal optimist, which is sometimes terrifying, but also it does keep me moving. So yeah, for us, just finding ways to elevate voices, like we were just talking about, and bringing people on, and maybe people that we weren't expecting to bring on because they're in our bubble. And I'm looking at it as sort of, there is optimism within that, and how to move forward from that scope.
I've been trying to just focus on like writing more. These are the perfect conditions to write when you're forced to socially distance. It's like, okay, I gotta stay in my room. And then also too, someone said this, how like through the like Obama administration, since it was like this time of joy and optimism, like people really leaned into drama and horror. And then now the last 4 years have been very challenging. And then also this year, how we're gonna see a huge uptick in like comedies and joy. So I've really just been trying to like lean into the comedy and in the joy and work on something that like I'm excited to work about and kind of like escape into. And then also too, this is like with everything going on and the budget constraints, it's just made me more creative of like stuff I want to shoot. Like who knew, like Zoom content, you know what I mean? Like that's, you know, but yeah, it's kind of like a really good time for like reflection and for writing, especially like if you want to get writing done right now. For me anyway, it's been really good. At least I tell myself that. I'm like, you're doing it. You're saying.
I was gonna say, that's so wonderful, because I can't bring myself to do any writing. I'm too tired. Don't know why. It's just pandemic haze of tiredness. Jordan, were you gonna say something? You weren't? Okay, I thought you unmuted yourself. And I
gonna say, like, to Jacqueline, this is the only thing you can really do this year is write, for sure. It's the only thing you can lean into at this moment. And and I'm lucky enough to be in a Sundance lab, and I think that helps against procrastination because they impose deadlines on you, and I think that is critical to getting writing done, is knowing that there's someone who's going to email you if you promise them a draft, and then you have to deliver.
Yes.
And congrats, Patricia, on your lab. That's amazing.
Thank you.
It is. Very good. Anybody else on that topic? I mean, it's not just about budget too. I mean, it's not just about budget. Like I mentioned, it's just a time of complete exhaustion. I mean, we're trying to navigate wearing a mask, social distancing, you know, but still trying to exist in this world and keep true to our artistic desires. I mean, it's really hard. The psychology of it is so interesting. And I have seen already content. Actually, we have a web series in the festival that's about distant learning, and they use the Zoom format, and it's hysterical. But the content that we are seeing is being done like that more often, and people are finding ways to tell their stories in that way. But I'm sure, also difficult to bring yourself to navigate this. And I'm just curious, does anyone, you know, feel like it is hard to be productive right now? All of you clearly have been productive,
Yeah.
but, you know.
I can say it's hard to be productive. I mean, for the first probably few months of this, I found the only thing I was able to watch was Tiger King, because that was like crazier than what was going on in the world. But other than that, I couldn't write, I couldn't read. I just was like anxiously checking my phone all the time. Like I found it extremely hard to be creative, because for me, like it's like if I open that creative part of me, like I can also access creativity in like thinking about the future, which is very scary. So I was kind of just like, what's the reality? What's right now? What am I focused on? But I think I've noticed that in my own writing, I've really leaned into excavating, you know, what I'm feeling now, and trying to work on my own narrative about my life and this time. Like I'm really interested in how you can transform based on how you tell your story. And so that's something that I'm like really focused on right now, but it's still hard every day. I'm like, oh, I've been out of work, but I'm able to write, but when are things going back to normal? But so it's a daily practice for sure.
It's been interesting. Oh, go ahead. Go.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Me? It's been interesting for me because I've been physically going out to work through the pandemic. I work in a grocery store to pay the bills when acting and film work isn't doing the thing. And so for me, the like going out and dealing with the anxiety of everybody else, like coming home and being able to write in some solitude has been a saving grace. Like, and even if I'm not, like, if nothing happens, like it's this moment for me to kind of like come back to something I know is tested and true, right? For me that works. And there's like, I don't know how you guys are doing it, like being, if you are trapped inside all the time, you know, and then you get these small moments to go out, because my life has kind of seemingly just carried on. My wife and daughter are home now, but my everyday is still much of the same. And I can see it on everybody's faces, you know, like they're just stressed to the max. And after 10 hours of that a day, like I really just, it's almost a relief to come home and write, and just kind of sit in my own thoughts. And, you know, I think it's, again, the experience and the representation of it. Like we're all going through our own versions of what's happening and finding our own ways to cope. And oddly enough, I've written more during the pandemic while working than I was in the months and years leading up to it. So I don't want to say I want to stay in this forever, but it's been a pretty like productive phase for me, you know?
Yeah.
I have to agree with that. First of all, thank you, everyone who works in grocery stores, because we need you guys through the entire pandemic. For me, it's, you know, to support myself, I have a personal training business, which went from being in gyms to the pandemic happening, and I got completely shut down. And then it turned out that I started training people online. And so it did allow me, when my lease ended in New York, to move to LA, where I also started writing again, and still still training people from online. So it's been a very productive season for me. I finished a rewrite on a screenplay that's now in the second phase of the UK Film Festival. I hope it keeps going. And that screenplay I have been working on for years, but I did that final rewrite in the first month of the lockdown. And now I just completed 2 pilots. One I co-wrote with a friend and the other one I just completed myself. I don't think I could have done that while I was going into gyms and training people like I did, because I would be so exhausted by the time I came home. It would take me 2 years to finish one thing. So I've written like 2 projects and working on another one now in this short time. So for me, but you don't do it all the time. I went through fatigue. You know, the first month I wrote like crazy, and then that second month I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in this for a long time. And then like 2 months later, I picked it back up and started writing again. So it's like, I got to pace myself through this. And because in my mind, I'm just thinking we will get out of this pandemic, at least in this way. And so when we are, I'm going to have so much more material to present when it's time to shoot. You know, I got cast in a project that got held up because of Corona. So I don't know when I'm going to shoot that project as an actress. So that was delayed. I was supposed to shoot that like 4 months ago. So, you know, you take the good with the bad and you just pray and hope for the best. And like I said, I just want to be ready when it's time to go, you know, so.
Sure. Yeah, you make a good point that if you're an actor and you go out and audition, you know, that can take up a whole day going to 2 auditions by the time you drive from maybe Santa Monica to Van Nuys or something. So I feel like, you know, it's almost kind of given us a gift of time on one hand, but then it's like a double-edged sword if you're the type of person that needs to feel busy and on the go, which I'm kind of that person. So it depends on the kind of artist you are. Anybody else on that? I know that the COVID topic isn't really, you know, about representation, but it's still very relevant. And I wanted to discuss it because it's real and it's happening right now.
Can I just remind, sorry, do you remember in the beginning of the pandemic when people were like, oh my God, Shakespeare wrote like 3 of his plays. He wrote like King Lear and like, I don't know, other ones, like his masterpieces during the pandemic in the beginning and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much pressure. But either way, I thought that was funny. I was like, oh God, okay, I guess I have to write like my 3 masterpieces in 2 years. Got it.
That was a big thing. I remember that because then everybody also came back and said, okay, but no one should feel obligated to be productive, you know, like it's okay if you're not.
I thought that was funny.
I think that people are finding their coping skills as we kind of get towards the end of this. So I'm just curious, you know, we're at an hour now, so I think I'm going to wrap it up with one more question. I know obviously we could talk about so many different things, but I just wanted to kind of do a general overview as we exit out of this conversation of what you are feeling about the future of indie film and maybe even the future of comedy indie film in terms of representation and the world that we're living in. Pretty soon, 2021 is going to be here. We don't know what's happening. So what are your hopes and dreams for the future? Big question.
My hope is that honestly, like this change is in the early phases, but is here to stay, you know, and I think really like a lot of the power within our community lies with the storytellers. And there's many ways to do that, whether you're a writer or an actor or a set dresser or a lighter, like we're all storytellers working together to create these narratives. And I do think that we're at a tipping point where one, like the diversity of America is just, it's vast at this point. We're not in 1776 anymore. You know, there are a lot of different people from a lot of different places and backgrounds with a lot of different dreams. And when they show up with passion and fire and stories and narrative, those things transform things. And I really feel like it's early. It's really early, but I do feel like, you know, you're seeing that tipping point. We're at least having the conversation, which, you know, is the first time I feel like it's kind of happened at this magnitude, certainly in my lifetime. And I feel like that's something to be recognized. Nothing happens overnight. These things take time, they take process, they take commitment from everybody. But I do think that we are on the verge of something different than we've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump on that because my hope, I think, just with the year that we've had and how much sort of self-reflection and awareness that we've been given as like globally, which hasn't happened in my lifetime on this scale. I'm just hoping that because of that, there's going to be more opportunities for voices that just haven't been heard in all arenas, in all areas. And if it's not, like, I talk with my team a lot about, it's just not my turn right now. And, finding ways to say whose turn is it and helping them if you can, or, taking a step down, but also elevating those voices. That's my hope for what's moving forward, because I just think that there's so much room for more stories and more diversity. And I think just, we have more attention from people globally than we've ever had in who we can sort of triumph and help. So that as a filmmaker, that's sort of what I want to be able to do.
I'm optimistic. I think between the pandemic, it's just really reminded us of like what's important and how like no one's immune to anything, and like our lives can change in a moment. Like this has affected everyone globally. This isn't just like one group of people. And I'm just really hopeful. And at this time, like we have YouTube, we have iPhones. So many of my friends are taking the initiative now too, especially with the pandemic. They're like, okay, life is short. These are what my priorities are. And they're just going for it. So I can't wait to see what comes out of this on the other side, because I think people that have been afraid to speak out, and not even if they do feel empowered, but because of like what society would think, or it's hard to do what we do. It's hard to like put ourselves on the line. I just know, I feel like people are just, it's going to be like this explosion of like just people going for it. And I'm super excited. And I really believe in my core, if something is good and resonates with people, whether they find it independently on YouTube or Amazon, whatever it is, it's going to reach a lot of people. So I'm really like hopeful and excited of what's to come and what we're going to see after this.
I like to piggyback on that. Thank you, Jacqueline, for saying that, because I do think that what 2020 did was put things in perspective. For my mom, it made her stop asking me when I was going to get married and have a kid, because she saw there was more urgent things happening out in the world. So for me, it gave me 1 year of a break. But outside of that, serious. I'm hopeful in 2021 that that's the year of the independent. I think everyone notices now how important it is for these independent voices and people who are not necessarily operating in the studio, because we need so much content to feed us, since everyone can't go to the theaters now. Like you say, they're watching things on Amazon and YouTube. There is room for us, like in a bigger way than there ever was before. And so I'm hopeful that with all of us working on all of our projects during the quarantine, that there's going to be an explosion of independent thought. It'll be like a renaissance of filmmaking and creative storytelling and just comedy. Comedy is my favorite thing. I love drama. I study as a dramatic actress, but I love to write comedy because it's the hardest thing to write, period. To make everyone, at least 50% of a room, laugh is way harder than making everyone cry. So I'm just hopeful that I hope comedy can just survive through a lot of things and make it in 2021 and, just keep growing. So that's my hope.
I'm sure other people want to speak, but I do want to say, the reality is that, like you're saying, with more and more options of getting our content out there, and people at home just, they really just want to eat it up. They want that content. They're looking for it. That's what gets that content higher up into the studios and gets the money, because you're talking about then all of a sudden studio is going to say, oh, there's an audience for this. I've already seen, just sitting on Hulu or whatever, I've already seen advertisers putting underrepresented communities in their commercials because they know that people want to see that. And I'm seeing it happen now. So you're absolutely right that now is the time to be putting your stuff up and getting that audience. Anyway, anybody else? Future dreams?
Yeah,
I like
I'm with.
let's go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, no, no.
It just feels like such a pep talk. I'm like, yes, all this love, let's go.
No, it's like a yes and no, but just meeting I keep having the fortune of meeting people through film festivals too, and all of you are incredible artists, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And it's so important to keep telling these stories. And thanks for, I mean, that's what makes me optimistic too. I think I'm an eternal optimist like you, Perry. But Mia, I was with you in the beginning. Like I couldn't deal. Like I just kind of, every time I try to be creative, I kind of melted into a puddle. But I think throughout this year, you see that we need these stories as you're going through your Netflix queue, through your Amazon Prime queue. So I hope that all this time we've taken of being creative and holding ourselves accountable. I finally have done that this month. I took a comic book writing class because I realized that right now I can't safely put a bunch of actors into a room, but I can do that through writing a comic, and it's pretty fun too. I can write giant explosions. I don't have to worry about a budget. It's really neat. So I hope that we can take all this time that we've had and just have a plethora of content, and especially content that hits upon every facet of representation, because we truly need that now. And I love that people are more aware of essential workers. Hey, thank you again. I think, again, you're right that COVID affects everyone. It doesn't discriminate against age, gender, sexuality, race, class. And we have to, and I think it's taught us to look out for one another. Every time I put on a mask, it's my civic duty, and it feels great. So I think that this positivity that we're experiencing by embracing one another and realizing, like, I don't know this person, they're a stranger, but I care about them enough to wear my mask. I think that's a beautiful thing. And hopefully that also happens when people are going through Netflix going, oh, well, that's an interesting story. It's not usually what I click on, but I'm going to try this. And then they fall in love with a new topic and a new series. And I just hope that people can keep opening their hearts and minds, and let's just stay positive, and especially through a vehicle like comedy. So.
Yeah. Anybody else? Mia?
What so much of it everyone said. I touched on this before, but I'm really hopeful that this time is a period of reflection for the people who make decisions. And I hope that it encourages them to be more thoughtful going forward.
Yeah, very good. You all are just very interesting and amazing people. I mean, this has been a really nice chat. I appreciate everyone's thoughts and comments on all of this. I'm really excited for everyone to see your work. Obviously, in the beginning, we already said what film you're with, but really quick, just in case someone kind of pops into this in the middle of it, can we go around again and say what your film is?
I'm Jordan Anderson, and I'm playing Derek in the film The Hood.
I'm Patricia Delgado, and I'm the writer and director of The Hood.
Who's next? Jowanda?
I'm Jowanda Durham, and I am the lead actress, the director, and co-writer of Rhonda Mitchell, MD, the web series, and check out all 5 episodes on YouTube and on Tubi.
And you'll get to see her, now that I know you're a trainer, you'll see this in action, everybody. You'll see how physically amazing she is. You'll get it when you watch it. Okay, next person. Think Mia.
Hi, I am Mia Jessup, and I am the writer, director, and executive producer of Summer in the City.
And then Jacqueline, I can do this.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Pereda, and I'm the creator of Generation Porque, also the director, and I play Jackie in the series.
Okay, what did I do last time? EW. So it's Perry next. I can do this.
Okay. My name is Perry Voss. I'm the co-creator, co-producer, co-writer, co-editor, and one of the stars of Avocado Toast, the series. You can stream it on Amazon Prime in the US and in Canada, and it's on Out TV in Canada as well and worldwide, but you can just go to our website to check it out. And you can follow us on social media. We're on everything. So yeah, check us out.
Yay, and Sarah. Oh,
I'm Sarah, and director of Killer Workout.
yes. I think you froze up a little bit, but this is Sarah, director of Killer
Oh,
Workout.
sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it didn't happen really once through this whole thing. I can't believe it. Thank you again, everybody, for taking time out of this pandemic to do this panel. And I'm so excited to have your film screen next week. So for anyone that watched this panel, go to LosAngelesComedyFilmFestival.org and you can see 10 different shorts programs. We have a couple features and we're excited about it. It's gonna be great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, evening.
Bye. Thank
wherever
you.
you're at.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jessica. Thanks for giving us a platform. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, you all. Bye.
Can't wait to see all your films.
So great. Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Nice
Bye.
to meet you all.